Well, good afternoon, everybody. I hope you can hear me well. On behalf of the vaccine monitoring collaboration, Daniel Weibel has organized this for the Secretariat to talk about booster vaccines. He's unfortunately ill, so I'm taking over to start the introduction. Today we have two speakers, Nicolas Turen from Bordeaux, Pharmacoepi, and also Saad Shakir, who will be discussing some ideas about the booster vaccines. So I would like to maybe after this welcome, give the word to Nicolas if you wish, and I hope Saad will be joining soon. I will monitor that he is here. I cannot see him yet. So is there anybody from DSRU that is able to see whether Saad will be joining? Let me see that I can check this. But maybe, Nicolas, maybe you can start. I will try to contact him in the meantime.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Miriam. So there is no really two speakers today because the idea is more about brainstorming and find together maybe innovative solution or just share ideas of how we could manage the assessment in real life of booster vaccination, more specifically about COVID booster vaccination. So I have some slides just maybe to introduce that. Am I able to share my screen, Miriam?
I think so. I can change presenter to you. 2 seconds, Nicolas. Yes. You should be able to present now.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hello, this is Saad. Can you hear me?
Yes, hi, Saad. Thank you.
I'm very sorry. I had problem connecting, so I connected with my iPad, but I can see the presentation.
Thank you, Saad, and great that you are here. We were about to start. Daniel, unfortunately, cannot join. He's ill. He has COVID, so and quite ill.
Yeah.
So I'm taking over this introduction from him. But I understood Nicolas will start, and you will also be leading the discussion on the brainstorm. So, yeah.
Okay, fine. Thank you.
Yeah, what I was just saying is that there is not really two true speakers today. It's more like a brainstorming session, so everybody should be able to. Should feel comfortable to share idea and point of view. So as an introduction, I've just tried to highlight on these slides all the potential vaccination administration schemes that have been used in several countries, specifically around Europe, with what we call in France a primo vaccination scheme, which is composed of basically 2 doses for most of the vaccine and only 1 dose is at the beginning for the Janssen one.
I cannot hear you anymore.
Thank you. Somebody mute me.
Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, do you hear me? Yeah, so I was saying that most of the schemes that we have in Europe with the primo vaccination and then the booster administration, which have been shifted in most countries from 6 months post primo vaccination to 3 to 4 months according to the country. And now we have new vaccine that are about to arrive on the market, at least in France, with the Novavax one, and perhaps Sanofi soon, and all the other conditions that can follow this first vaccination scheme and this first round of a booster that most of us received. So from this situation arise several questions. That's the basic one, but I get that there are many others around this topic, which are how to address confounding by the previous vaccine dose, because at the stage of assessing the booster, you need to have a careful understanding of the previous stage before vaccination to be able to generate estimates that are not biased. We also have to manage the changes in the timelines because switching booster administration from 6 to 3 months may also impact the results that you will generate. And another question is how to address the contamination by COVID that could take place between the administration of the different doses and the potential impact to the outcome that you will measure post vaccination. So that are the main questions that we should try to brainstorm around. I don't know if Sad have extra words about the situation.
Well, thank you, Nicholas. I will say a few things. I agree with everything you said. I have in this PowerPoint more slides to sort of bring to the discussion the issues which we are having about this a study which we are doing, which includes the third jab. So if I get the next slide, please, and whoever changing the slides, well, I'll keep saying next slide. So this is the scheme where people have the first 2 doses. And in the UK, for example, the first 2 doses could have been either AstraZeneca or Pfizer or Moderna. So the period after the first 2 doses, after the first dose, in the studies, you are enrolled in the studies when you have a first dose. Most people have second dose, but some people do have just the first dose. So the green period, period A, where you monitor and any adverse events would be, assessed to be related to the first 2 doses. I'll talk about the comparator in a few minutes. So that was straightforward. Then people had the third booster, and the third booster can be the same vaccine which you had in the first 2. So you could have had Pfizer in the first 2, and your booster could be Pfizer. You could have Moderna in the first 2, you could have Pfizer in the first 2 doses, and your booster could be either Pfizer or Moderna. You could have Moderna in the first 2 doses. Ditto, your booster could be Pfizer or Moderna. Or you could have AstraZeneca in the first 2 doses, and your booster could be Pfizer or Moderna because AstraZeneca was not recommended for the booster dose. Now then, after the booster dose, you're going to get adverse events. And here is a confusion. With the adverse events which you had after the booster, could it be causally related to the first 2 doses of a different vaccines or the same vaccine, or could it be causally related to the booster? So next slide, please. Right. So we thought that the period after the third booster, say the first week or the first 10 days, whatever we choose, we consider the events which are known to acutely occur after a vaccine, events such as painful arm, high temperature, tiredness, the kind of immediate event. We could reasonably say that they were to the third booster because these events happen frequently after vaccination, but we can't be absolutely certain, but we be reasonable. But if you get an event in the yellow period B, say if you get Guillain-Barré syndrome, will that can be attributed to the first 2 doses, or could it be to the booster, or could it be to the combination of the 3 jabs which you had? And that is something which is very difficult to attribute to any of these 3 scenarios. So next, please. And this is, we could argue that we are assessing the safety of the vaccination, which include 3 doses. So we consider evaluating period A as the period where the attributability would be to the first vaccine, or period B, which could be a complex period. Some events could be related to the 3rd booster, or some in a question mark, or we assess period blue, which is A plus B, and we say these events, the Guillain barre, which occurred on top of the green period or late in the blue period with the yellow period, we say these events are due to the vaccination, and we couldn't say in this study whether they are caused by the first 2 jabs or the 3rd jab. Or the 3rd jab, yes. Next, please. Now, there are possible comparators. There could be a small number of people who had the 1st and the 2nd dose, but didn't have the 3rd. And there are quite a reasonable number of people who, for some reasons of believing the internet or whatever, don't like to take the 1st jab. They are a minority. Out of 66 million in the UK, 39 million people took the 3rd dose, but they're still a significant number. The question is, if we compare what happens in the yellow period or the red-yellow period in these, we could do the comparison, but what are the characteristics of these people? Age, sex, concurrent illnesses, being anti-vaxxers, and so on. And also, in the early phases, the people who didn't have any vaccination, it's a depleted group, because with time, more people got the 1st and the 2nd dose. The 3rd possible comparators are the people who chose not to take any vaccination. Small number. Well, when I say small number, in the UK, there are 5 million people who decided not to be vaccinated out of nearly 7 million. But as we say, these are anti-vaxxers. There is a lot of young people, more young people who decide not to take any vaccine than older people, and so on. So this is the problems with the comparisons. So next slide, please. As we know, the companies, in our discussion with them within VAC4EU, both of them, didn't want to give any special consideration to the 3rd jab other than recording it and recording the events which happens after it. And, for the Pfizer and Moderna, for example, in the UK, the 3rd jab could be their vaccine. For the AstraZeneca, could be another vaccine. And even for Pfizer or Moderna, it could be an mRNA vaccine, the 3rd jab, but it could be an mRNA vaccine which is not theirs. So you could have had, as I said, initially 2 jabs of Pfizer and you get a Moderna and vice versa. So the question which I'm putting for discussion is, if we have a study where the inception, the recruitment, is when the person gets the 3rd jab, and the fact that they had 2 previous doses would be in the previous medical history, that as they could have in the previous medical history, we also ask whether they had a flu jab within a certain period of time, or they have any other vaccination, or they have other illnesses. So the study would be, the inclusion would be at the time of the 3rd booster. And then the comparators would be with people who say yes, they had vaccination, or people in the lower group, which they said no vaccination whatsoever. And could we identify a comparator group where people starting at a similar date to those who had the third booster, but they chose not to take the third booster, but they were vaccinated previously? And that model, we don't know how are we going to quote unquote live with COVID if that is become an annual event where you get a booster jab or every 2 years or whatever the frequency would be decided. That method of studying it would be similar to the methods which we do with flu. We study exposure to flu, which can be different strains and so on, every year at the time of vaccination in the autumn and the fall, and we monitor the events. And we may include in the studying whether they had previous flu jabs, usually did they have events, did they have anaphylaxis, and so on. And did they have problems? And we also look at the other diseases, whether they have history of allergy, and so on and so forth. So the problems which we are having is, if we go back to slides 1, 2, 3. So yeah, this slide. We have decided to analyze the 3 periods. So we are looking at events and the denominator for period A, events with denominator of period B, and events with the denominator period C, and also we find people who were not vaccinated. The problem is we are defining these exposures and outcomes, but we don't know whether we do formal comparisons. Should we do it with propensity scores? Should we do it with logistic regressions? Or should we just describe the 3 groups, period A, period B, and period C, with frequencies and confidence intervals, and say, and people who are not vaccinated, and we say, there are problems with comparisons. So I am presenting the problems, presenting some description of the problem, having some ideas which are really at the bottom of my heart. I don't think they are very good ideas, but just throwing it in the ring, in the brainstorming, to hear what you think. So that is it. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Saad. That's very nice to put it out there like this. In the meantime, I have unmuted everybody, so if you want to speak, you can unmute yourself, but you are allowed, so it's not anymore in webinar mode for that. Is there anybody who would like to comment here? And I think we have a hand from Xavier. Yes, I was hoping that Xavier is our causal inference person here.
Could you remove the document so that we can see faces, please? Unshare, yes. Yeah.
Can you share your camera?
I don't know.
Anyway,
honestly, with this system, I don't know how to share my camera.
Anyway, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry about that. Okay, thank you very much for this presentation of the problem. I wanted to ask, first of all, what is the research question? Because that is what will guide the rest of the design. For example, and I'm not reinventing the wheel here. This has already been analyzed and published. If we want to estimate the effect of receiving a booster versus not receiving a booster, we will have to analyze a population that has been fully vaccinated, because otherwise you cannot receive a booster, right? This is the equivalent of running a randomized trial where you have a population that has been fully vaccinated and you randomize them to receive a 3rd dose or not. If we want to answer that research question, I think the design is very easy and very clear. in this case, we would have a time zero for those receiving the booster, that is the date they received the booster, and we have to find a population that have been vaccinated and that can have a time zero that is the equivalent of those that received the booster. In a prior publication in Lancet, they did that by having an inclusion criterion that was having received the complete scheme of vaccination at least 5 months ago, and then they match individuals in many other variables. So that was an easy and elegant way to solve this problem. With that design, we don't have the problem of having an event and not knowing whether it can be attributed to the prior 2 doses or the 3rd dose disappears, because we have a control group. So if there is an excess rate in the 3rd dose group, it's because there should be an effect, because we have a control group that already received 2 doses as before. I have another comment, but I wanted to stop here to see whether anybody else has any comments on this idea.
So go ahead, Miriam.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I mean, the question is the one which I raised is that, as you say, is a very elegant idea. The question is as Nicholas mentioned, are the people who were not initially vaccinated, are they biased? Are there confounders? Is there a bias? Either a comparative group? Why did people were not vaccinated? When, as we say in the country where we are doing the study in the UK, 5 million people, so 90% of the people were vaccinated and 5 million were not vaccinated. So you're saying that we compare, excuse me, with the people, the 5 million who are not vaccinated. But they, as I said, they could be younger, and some of them are not vaccinated for a belief reason, and some of them were not vaccinated. There were a lot of pregnant women who, for example, chose not to be vaccinated, even they were strongly advised to, and so on. So there will be different in the demographics and health characteristics between the people who are vaccinated and not vaccinated. Some events doesn't matter because anaphylaxis, your previous history doesn't matter, but with some other events, it may matter.
Yes, and I agree. But if we want to include that population, so my point is that you can only receive a booster if you already received 2 doses of the vaccine.
Correct.
What you're asking now, the research question you're posing now is very interesting, but it's not about receiving a booster. It's about receiving 3 doses of the vaccine versus not receiving 3 doses of the vaccine. Not about receiving a booster or not. It's about receiving the whole sequence or receiving no vaccine or only a partial sequence of the 3 possible doses. If we are interested in that, then the design has to be different. Of course, we have to start counting the events early at the very beginning, where people can start receiving the first dose or not. But that's another design and probably more complicated. But if we want to estimate the effect of a booster, the example that I gave and that is published in Lancet, I think it's a very straight way to address that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Xavier, there is a comment or question from Ying Zhao. So maybe go first there.
Jing Zhao from Oslo. I just want to say something about, I think, in terms of the much smaller population want to get a 3rd jab, I would vote for propensity score, because more specifically speaking, it's just if adverse event is the outcome, and we can give propensity score to people that's give the score for treatment to get and treatment at this moment is just getting vaccines, and then like young people and who got first 2 jabs, and maybe have a little bit mild adverse event previously, probably are really less likely to be dosed, get the third jab. And then if among those groups there's one person get adverse event, then when we apply the inverse probability treatment weighting, I think that makes more sense. But in terms of attribute, how to attribute, I don't know. But I have another question. I have a small concern, which is I noticed that the third jab happens in autumn. For example, in UK, and people from the older group, they might have both a flu jab and COVID jab. I don't know if the flu jab would be another annoying confounder or that we need to take into account, because I do know there exist people that take those two jabs at the same time or within really short intervals. I guess it's only will influence some mild adverse events. Yeah, that's all I wanted to say for the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Ying. So is there anybody who would like to respond to that? Xavier, yes, you unmute.
Yes, yes, I can respond to that. So if I understood correctly, the first part of the question was about using propensity scores or inverse probability weighting. I guess you mean to adjust for baseline confounding. In this, for my experience in vaccine studies, we are in a unique situation where sample size are big as compared with probably other studies that we are used to. So honestly, I'm fine with any approach. I'm fine with matching. I'm fine with not matching, but using other standardizing techniques, as long as we are doing a good job in capturing all the potential confounders and knowing which assumptions we are using. I think we are fine. And here you mentioned a very important point, which is having had an adverse reaction to prior doses. That's very interesting because that can determine whether you receive the booster or not, or whether you're willing to go and get the third dose. So that's using subject matter knowledge to describe which confounders we need to capture. And regarding the second point you made, which is about the concomitant administration of the flu and COVID vaccine, I agree with you that can be a noise factor. The only approach I can see there is stratifying our arms into people that receive both vaccines, or only one vaccine, or no booster. That's the only thing I could think of.
I just want to make one comment about the propensity score. Thank you. It's a good idea. The problem is, with the vast majority of the people who don't take the third jab or any jab, the reason is not medical to include in the formula of the propensity score. The reason is just they don't want to be vaccinated. So the matching on the basis of demographics and other things might be, and do we have sufficient information about whether they have any medical conditions to include in the propensity score calculation is difficult. It's not like a medicine, and you know why they don't take it because they have this or that condition. There will be very limited information, both in secondary databases, primary databases, about the people who don't get vaccinated, because very likely that they had no contact with the healthcare system during the period of the study. And so, but we have to find a standardization of sorts. But I just wanted to raise the point that the reason for not vaccination more frequently would have been non-medical.
So then it's a matter of always, it's between the choice of like a simple propensity score, where we could imagine to choose all the parameters we would like to include, such as previous jab you received, the flu vaccination, perhaps the temporal space between your two first doses, or the first and the third, or to use like more computer driven process such as high dimensional propensity score, which are supposed to adjust for unmeasured confounders.
Yeah.
Can I understand it this way? Like, yeah, you already explained very clearly. Sorry, I just have a small question, additional question. Just, is it very different from the government's recommended the prioritized group, like people with healthcare are more likely to get third jab, older group with severe some disease, underlying disease, and for about 45, about 50. So about people who get the third jab so far from the observed data, does it have some consistency with the prioritized group? I don't know if I phrased the question properly.
So in fact, you are supposed to compare people with similar background history. So you can imagine that in a cohort approach, you will compare people with a bit older with specific healthcare pathway and that received a specific scheme with specific vaccine without a specific booster or no booster, with the booster of interest, I would say, with people with exactly the same background. In this way, you will be adjusting for all the elements that you previously rose.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And
can I? Okay, go ahead, Jing.
Oh yeah. So it just the people who get who are more likely to, who are willing to, or who already got the third jab now, so they are consistent with the prioritized group for the first two doses.
I'm not sure I understand you, Ying.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, never mind. I'll try to.
Well, just to help you, in the UK, the people, the older people, and people who have immunocompromised for medical reasons or for diseases, and people with concurrent illnesses, they were prioritized and they had all jabs, including the third jab, early, and B, there is a higher proportion of them who actually got the third jab. They are very compliant, as opposed to the younger group and the healthier group. So I don't know whether that was your question, but these higher risk group, if you like, they were prioritized time-wise, and there is a higher intake by them for all the jabs.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And we know from prior studies, like for the EMA, that there is really a lot of confounding then in those different vaccine cohorts, because of that channeling of the vaccines, first of Pfizer to those, it was just the first, and it was prioritized for those that were frail and older, and then we had all the adverse events happening with the AstraZeneca and Janssen, so they were limited in use. So there is a lot of channeling and confounding in the rollout of the vaccine. So that's something, yeah, we always need to consider, I think.
Okay. Yeah.
I have a question actually that follows up on Xavier's very simple proposal, which is always illuminating in its simplicity, which is, okay, so what is the research question? And then if it's the effect of the booster, then you compare those who are fully vaccinated. When we were thinking about the proposal on the effectiveness, one of the key things that came up is, should you actually match that they have the same primary scheme? So do you make them totally the same? There are differences. So it's like, people can have heterologous schemes, they can have different primary schemes, they can have, if they had COVID in between somewhere, they will only have one dose. Do you consider that as a 2-dose regimen? So there are a lot of these even even if it's simple, there are a lot of like what happened in the primary scheme. How much of that do you fully match out of, or not? I don't know, Cynthia, what you have been thinking about that.
Well, thank you for this question. If we thought that the effect of the booster is going to be the same, no matter what was your prior vaccination history, we would just lump everyone together, every vaccination scheme, any combination, even if they had the disease or not. If we think that the booster is gonna have different effects depending on your prior history, depending on your characteristics at baseline for this study, then we should be running different studies here. So just running subgroups or different subcohorts.
This is sad, Miriam. I just want to follow up on this because that's an important point which I've been thinking about. The subpopulations which Xavier is talking about, there are some events where there is depletion of the susceptibles, and there are some events where they are likely, the occurrence is likely to increase. Let me give you an example. With the clotting in thrombosis with thrombocytopenia, with the DNA vaccine, there is depletion of the susceptible because it occurred with the first dose, and the people who had it didn't take the second or the third dose. While with myocarditis and pericarditis, because some of the biological theories are assuming that it's related to the amount of antigen, S antigen that is released and the antibodies, they occurred more frequently at the second jab, and they could occur even more frequently after the third jab if sufficient number of people take them, because the higher your immunity, the more antibodies you produce, the more likely that they will mistake your heart for the virus and get these events. So it may be that we have to do the research questions could be split, and the method split depending on the biological understanding of the events. So, we may take that into consideration when we are talking, when we are doing the study. So that is something which I thought about. I need to leave at 1:45 to go to another meeting. Just to throw something at you. In the UK now, they're asking vulnerable people, immunocompromised, immunosuppressed, people who have cancer, chemotherapy, to have a fourth jab. And that would be extremely interesting. But that's maybe a story for another day.
Well, thank you, Saad. That's very interesting. Are there any other issues that people have or concerns around studying the booster doses? Or issues they have come across?
Miriam, it's Patrick. Hello. We have the example of Israel where they started the fourth injection. So do we have today any kind of information that would be in favor of this fourth dose?
I don't know, but I would assume so. I just read yesterday that the changed, or the addition of changing the antigen consistent with Omicron doesn't really change the effectiveness or efficacy as compared to the old series. I assume in Israel they will be studying the effect of the fourth dose at the moment, because they have been the first in any of the studies done there. Is anybody aware of what they have published recently?
It's because Saad was talking about the fourth dose with immunocompromised or in cancer therapy patient, and I know that that's also part of the discussion here in Belgium, where they are thinking maybe for this kind of particular patient, I would say that might be worthy to think to a fourth dose, but I guess that the Belgium authority are mainly waiting for the answers from the Israeli people being receiving this fourth dose.
I also think that in Israel, the fourth dose is given to everybody, not only to the immunocompromised and the high risk. I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's true. I think they're just injecting people who are over, I think it's 65 or 70. They really target old elderly people.
Okay. Thank you, Patrick. So is there anybody else that has a comment or a question to the, the methodologist in this group, like that you have been struggling with? We have an opportunity now.
Hello, Miriam. This is Elisa.
Hi, Elisa.
Hi, everyone. I was thinking that regarding the data we have been analyzing for the effectiveness of the primary vaccination in a cohort study, I concern on the misclassification on the date of the severe COVID, maybe death for COVID, around the moment of the comparison. I was thinking that maybe this is something clear for everyone, but it's something I would like to share with you. Around for those cases of hospitalized COVID that we may find around the time zero, which is, let's say, the booster moment for the patient who received the booster, and that same date for the comparator. If we find, I think we may have less probability to find, for example, hospitalization for COVID immediately after that vaccination booster versus the control moment or the control pair. And I think that may be due to the misclassification of the date, of the precise date of the correct COVID positive test. I mean that when a patient receives a booster, is because she or he feel healthy, and we know for sure that at the moment of time zero, they are not sick. They don't feel sick, and they have not COVID. But that we cannot say the same for the control people. I think in that case, we may be finding a lot of protection of the COVID soon after the booster. It's kind of healthy effect of the vaccinated people. I don't know if you have any experience on that, but in our preliminary analysis, we found a lot of protection during the first week after the complete primary vaccination. And also, yes, I think we may have to deal with that when we compare booster versus non-booster. Thank you. I don't know if I have explained.
Yeah, I think so, Elisa. So I think in the area of the influenza vaccines, we are very much aware of that, like healthy vaccinee effect. So it's clear that you only get the vaccine when you are healthy. The question I think you're asking is how to deal with it. Xavier, I see you are muting, so I will let.
Well,
the word.
Hello, Ellie. How are you?
Hello.
So I think it's you just described a problem of a measure confounding. If we had perfect information on the health status and symptoms and everything of everyone, we wouldn't have this problem because we would be able to exclude people or match people or adjust away those differences. But the problem you're explaining is real. We don't have such a granular information. So yeah, that's something that can happen. And what you described, finding differences in the first few days, is a good implementation of a negative control outcome. We know that in the first few days we shouldn't be identifying an effect, and you do. So I don't have a solution to that. I just wanted to put different words in what you just explained. It's a problem of measure confounding, and it is what it is.
So yes, it's like, for me, it's kind of a uncertain date that is more clear among the control than the vaccinated in that moment. Something like that. I wanted to share that because in our experience, that kind of misclassification of potential unmeasured confounding control, it's more important in terms of quantitative effect. I think it's more important than the adjustment that we were discussing previously, which is needed for the analysis, but for us, I think that misclassification on the date or kind of other unmeasured confounder is stronger than the than general, I don't know. Yes, measured confounding. Thank you.
So what could you do? So yes, you could have a negative control outcome, and that means you can see that that's not supposed to be an effect. It will be difficult to have it because it's having COVID is so much the cause of not getting the vaccine. So it's difficult to assume that a negative control would be having the same impact, I think. So would it be an option? I just want to put it out there, like what would occur to me is that you wouldn't estimate effectiveness in the first week after vaccination.
Maybe it's true that maybe if we wait for, we have just maybe implement a lag time or something like that to avoid that date misclassification.
I think that could be one fix, but because you would not assume that the booster has an impact immediately the day after.
From a biological point of view, you should wait for 1 week before having the full capacity of the booster to protect you.
Yes, in that case, I think we would avoid the inclusion of misclassification in the date of the outcome, differential misclassification.
Yes.
Maybe yes. For me, to find a negative control is difficult. I have never done that, and for me, it's difficult to find. In that case, I would have to. Well, we would have to think in detail that. Yes, but it can be very interesting.
Yeah, it's very difficult, I think, for the COVID because it's properly. I mean, it's really the COVID that would tell you to not go for the vaccination. I mean, there could be others like. I don't know, Xavier, what do you think?
No, I was thinking that, well, the negative control is just a way to find a problem, but what's the solution to the problem here that we already found? I don't know. I know some protocols have, or some studies have excluded individuals or have selected individuals based on their interactions with the healthcare system as a way to exclude people that might be sick. I'm not a fan of excluding part of the follow-up, but there is not an easy solution here. I don't have it on top of my head.
And I have an extra question. If we move a bit on the time, what about the patient having COVID just after the third jam? how will you be able to assess, for example, the safety? Because most of the adverse event of serious interest related to vaccine may also be outcome from COVID infection. So should we censor the patient when COVID is happening post-vaccination, or how to do that?
Well, if I may, that was addressed in one of the New England papers using Israeli data about the safety of the vaccine. They deal with that by, as you said, by censoring people who have the COVID, and that's an approximation to what is called the direct effect of the vaccine. In that paper are all the assumptions behind that effect, but yeah, because part of the effect of the vaccine is through preventing infection with the virus, but we want to estimate the real adverse event that is directly caused by the vaccine. So yeah, what they did in that paper was censoring people when they had COVID infection.
This is Andrea. I think that approach might have worked, but may no longer work, in that COVID is becoming so frequent that everyone would be censored in the end, but mostly there may be no records.
You're correct, actually. Just another problem, Andrea. Yes. Yes, so we would not be able then to estimate the direct effect of the vaccine anymore. So it would be the combination. Yeah, and then, just to complicate matters, this is also very much related to the type of variants that are circulating, or the genetic strain. So I think currently, it will be for the fourth booster, and in this wave where there is an explosion of Omicron, it will be very difficult to estimate the direct vaccine effect still.
And that will, because if there is no difference, if we are comparing two different vaccines, you can suppose that there is no strong difference about the spread of COVID between the two vaccines. But then if we want to compare people that receive a booster with the people that did not receive a booster, that will be even more complicated, because you can suppose that there is difference between the spread of the COVID in the two different populations.
Yes. So to have an active comparator is probably
the good solution for the forthcoming new vaccines.
Yeah.
To avoid losing everybody, like everybody gets infected, shouldn't we just taking into account that what variant is prevalent at the time when we look at the adverse events for certain, in this case, Pfizer vaccination? Would that be helpful? I wonder, because say this certain vaccination is made for with respect to different certain variant strain. I don't know how to call it the terminology, but yeah, I think it only makes sense to measure vaccine with respect to the variants that is meant to work for.
Yes, and again, there the question becomes then, do you adjust for it, or do you take care of the variant that is circulating at time 0 or at the time of the event, because of the the vaccine clearly is an intermediate here, I think. Xavier, any lucid ideas here?
No, you got me off guard here. I don't know. Sorry.
Yeah. So I think the safest is to do it the strain that's circulating at T0, avoid any complicated matters. But this is maybe a good question for our next webinar. I think we are approaching the hour. I would like to thank Nicholas and Saad, who has already left, unfortunately, for their, starting up the discussion about the methodological issues we are facing in the various vaccine studies that are ongoing, whether they are safety or effectiveness. So thank you for joining and listening and contributing. I think it was quite clarifying, at least for me, and very nice. So thanks a lot for the contribution, and in particular, Xavier, for all your responses. So
my pleasure.
And thank you, Miriam, for animating that a bit more.
Mm-hmm.
Good. Have a good afternoon, everybody.
Thank you, Miriam. Bye-bye.
Good afternoon.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.